Grace and Mercy Enlightenment Corner, and where we enlighten each other, where we educate, we empower, where we just look at broad issues that affect us in our everyday life, things that maybe we are aware of, things that we might not be aware of. And so anytime or every time we bring people to join us, we really get empowered and enlightened. So before I start, I think it's only appropriate to acknowledge what today is as well for In His Grace and Mercy. Muruti Kekana, Dr. Kekana Wahola today. It's his birthday today. So let's wish him a beautiful birthday and ask God to be with him, you know, to increase him, to bring him all his heart's desires. And for Yana, fortunately, he shares the day with his daughters, with one of his daughters. So to both of them, we say, may God richly bless you. May you be covered under his wings. So with that out of the way, we can now start today's session. If you missed what the topic is today, we are looking at autism. We're looking at the journey of autism because the UN has declared the 2nd of April, which was yesterday, the Autism Awareness Day, right? But the whole month of April is Autism Month. So we don't just look at a day, but we look at the whole month, and the whole purpose of setting aside this day is so that we can, one, raise awareness about autism spectrum disorder, two, get to understand how we see it, like how does it manifest, you know, what are the symptoms, how do you manage it, if you have a loved one who has autism, and Khomoto will educate us on the language, you know, in every sector, there's a language that is appropriate, right? I know, for example, when we talk about HIV, we call them PLHIV, people who live with HIV, but I know that there've been some who say, I don't live with it, I have HIV. So it's those kind of things that every time you need to ask the people who are in the sector, what is the appropriate way of addressing these issues. So before we go deep into the conversation, let me just open with a word of prayer, because for us on In His Grace and Mercy, we always start with God. We always do everything with God in mind, because we know that we are able to do things ka gore modimo e le ena a re fileng monyetla, a re fileng motsotso, and e le ena a re fang le botlhale ba go kgona go, you know, to look at these issues and help each other. So let us just quickly invite God, and we will start with the conversation. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have made for us, even as we sit, Mudumaga, to empower each other with information, with knowledge. May we be blessed as your people. May we learn and apply what we are taught. And again, as we bring the two celebrants before you today, as they celebrate their birthday, re re Modimo, o tshepagetse ka nako tsotlhe, ke wena bophelo, ke wena setshhabelo, tsotlhe re di tlisa ho wena, lebitsong le le matla la morena wa rona Kriste Jesu. Amen. I think I've done the formalities now. I can bring you in, Khomoto, to just say hi, introduce yourself. You are not a newbie here. You've been here before, you know, on the same topic. I think it's safe for me to call you a specialist, right? Specialist in the autism, you know, space. So we are going to learn a lot from you. I must say, I only know, you know, the limited information that I have, but I'm looking forward to learning and deep diving with you on the issues. So after you tell us your name and who you are, you can tell us, why is autism so important? You know, why do we need to even have this topic right now? We could have been watching something on TV, but we are here with you. Why? Why is it so important for us to be here? You understand?
So let's start right there. Because if you know anything about me, I'm a big birthday person. So the fact that somebody can give up their birthday to be with us, Aishin, we're incredibly blessed. They are far bigger people than me. But yes, thank you so much, Rakikana, and your daughter. Happy birthday. Osfina, I am excited to be with you because I have been such a fan. You don't know for how long. I think I've been a bit of a stalker as well. I love the work you do.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
From the hairstyles, from the energy, like Wanzamaela. So this was actually quite exciting that we got to do. And as activists, sometimes you find yourself engaging with people and you forget that and like but hey, it is what it is. It is
Yes,
what it is.
yes.
Nna ke nna Kgomotso Malagae Mwalusi. I'm a mother wa Lethabo le Lesedi, and they are the people who usher me into the space. Like yourself, my space was gender, was young people, and Bona. I was holding up the sky and doing all the great things. And
Mm,
God was like, "Oh, okay, wait a bit. There's something else that because you grow up and you think you are somebody who's very aware of what is going on with other people. Show
mm,
kindness, be good, and try like kibitsang, right? Like you call
mhm,
other people to be with you. And it's through this journey that I had a very harsh wake up call that what? In the world, there's a whole sector of people that we don't see or consider, and we don't even know that we don't see or consider them. You know,
yeah.
um, one of my favorite things is sometimes when you're talking about disabilities, people will show you that they have a ramp and maybe they have some sign language and they have a disability toilet. But that doesn't cover everybody in this huge, huge sector. So to have to go through a journey, having children, as a single parent, having twins, bonus, but then having
Mhm,
your children having a condition that you didn't understand.
yeah.
And for me, Osina, it's and this is why I love the platforms of faith and churches, because I think here we can like we can speak fully, right?
Yeah.
Because we are speaking with each other, but we are speaking with God as well. Having children is such a spiritual thing. It is
Mm,
almost like a covenant between yourself and God, right? And then when things do not turn out in the way that you envisaged, it's almost as if God Himself has betrayed you. And in
mm,
that moment, where do you turn to? Because in naming our children, Letabo Umpile, like Mudimu Umpile, Letabo, Lesedi, La Khotso, there's a
mm,
plan that you saw, there is a life that I saw. And then something along the way just said, no, that's not how we're going. And
yeah.
also, that's not how you're going in a sense, ya gore, with something that seemed so strange. I'm one of those people, I'm a book person. I've always read. I would have told you I am prepared for anything and everything, but this I was not. I was
Mm,
not prepared ke le kgomotso, ke bala, ke tlotla, to have children who've got communication issues,
yeah.
who may or may never read, who may never, or who may not show their precociousness in the way that I do. And that really, 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 really shook my spirits in many ways. We'll talk about what the condition is, but I am now in the space because the journey found me as an activist. I wasn't already an activist, but I realized I wasn't an activist at the level that I thought I was. Because there's one thing about fighting for a cause, and there's fighting for a cause that you are living, and you are seeing the fights on multiple levels on a daily basis. And I think I was saying to a fellow mother the other day, I was saying, being an activist is a curse and a blessing, because liable or depressed, that fire in you comes and you're like, no, we are fighting another day, because fighting. And ironically, what is my hymn from school? Fight the good fight with all your might. And like now we like, my God, Mary, nzame something else, but we are fighting the good
Then
fight.
he asked for these things. Eh? He's like, okay, you asked for it, take.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So I am here with you today as an ally. I myself am
Mhm,
an ally. So as an activist, you will know one of the things that are always awkward is when you are fighting a cause and you are not that. For the longest time, people would say to me, "Khomotso, you're good at advocating. You must start something, do a foundation, do something." And I keep saying, but I'm not autistic. I can talk
mm,
about it because I'm talking for my kids, but even in my talking, I'm constantly bargaining. Le modimo gore, wa itse keng? These kids will one day speak and be able to take over the platform because I know
yeah,
this is not my fight, but I can
yeah,
speak to how do we support autistics themselves so that they can express themselves, so that the world understands. And that's why for me it was very important to speak about autism allyship. Like, we are going to be here with you no matter what. I am your mother. You know, God entrusted you to me. I will fight this. But there's also a lot of unfairness on this journey, Osfina. You
mm,
know, as a mother, when you have a child who doesn't necessarily want to look at you in the eye or hug you or be held by you, o tla go re
mm,
bitšhela teng gantsi. So modimo wena ko kwatetse, then ke na le ngwana, then I need to get closer to my child, but I'm struggling to get closer to my child because it feels like a
yeah,
rejection on multiple levels.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
that would be my introductory remarks.
So
Thanks.
it's a loaded introduction, and I've learned today that, allyship is not only in spaces where for us in feminism we say we need allies, people who will stand with us, even if they are not women, they need to stand for women
Mhm,
issues. So today I'm learning that even if your child doesn't have autism, even if you
mhm.
don't have autism in the family, but be an ally, be aware of what it is and how you can support, because allyship
Exactly.
is about comradeship. It's about supporting and helping to fight
And
the
saying,
cause.
I see you, I see you, I
Yeah,
see what you're going through, and I'm going to be with you to help you in whichever way you require me to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So maybe somebody's saying, but you're not autism because okay, I must be an ally, I must support, but what am I supporting? So maybe let's unpack it a bit for everyone who's listening on radio, on Sauma HD Radio, and on our Facebook and YouTube platform to really understand what it is.
All right. So autism is a neurological condition. Neurological, we are talking about the brain and the working of the brain and how the brain communicates from the brain to the body. And then, of course, how we then communicate with each other. So, almost in the same way that each of our fingerprints are unique, each of our brains are unique. And what is happening in autism is one can be either hyper or hypo sensitive, right? We all have
Mhm.
we know the senses, the five senses, the
Yeah.
hearing, smelling, seeing, tasting, and touching. But now somebody who's autistic experiences some of these senses either at a heightened or a lessened level. And then there's extrasensory issues with them, which are vestibular or proprioceptive, but also social. Now, for us who are communicators, Osvina, it's one very interesting thing. We live in a world where you show your smartness by how you speak. And I think for me, one of the things I have learned and I've taken into the autism is these senses are how we communicate. So you get to know how things feel by touching or hearing, etc., etc. So when you are autistic, that communication from your brain to your sense is sometimes broken or slowed or not really working in the way that it is. I mean, we can go totally technical to talk about how when you go through something, it goes through your amygdala, how you respond, etc., etc. But in short, it is that your volume is either
Mhm.
totally high or totally low. And I think also one of the things we will say about autism is it is a lifelong condition. So there
Mhm.
is no cure. Every therapy, every medication, everything that we're going through is towards maintaining, lessening anxiety, and helping one to be, I don't want to use the word functional, but for purposes of understanding, I think that is what we would go to. Now,
Yeah.
on top of the senses, now imagine being in a space where you struggle to read expressions. I don't want to say humor, but I would even say sarcasm. So people who are autistic are very concrete, right? So, and I think also another thing that is worth saying that makes autism so difficult to understand for many people is no two autistic people are the same. So I am
Mm.
raising autistic twins, and they are not the same. They do not experience their autism the same. You started off saying, as you go into different sectors, you would be calling in what is appropriate. Again, I will repeat, I'm not the person to say what is appropriate, but I will say my belief is, unlike many other conditions, I vie away from the someone living with autism, because it's not an additional,
Mm.
as a jazz, as a
Yeah.
katiba.
Mm.
An autistic experiences life through the prism of autism. They hear through the prism of autism. They see through the prism of autism. So I think I go with the school that says they are autistic. They're autistic individuals,
Mm.
But of course, as more and more people are able to communicate, they will then guide us on what is most appropriate. But as a parent and somebody who's an activist, I think I'm at the point where it's, yes, use the terms, but I think I'm more excited about people being curious to know and learning.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
there's far more to be done with that than to be caught up in the nuances of symbols or names, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how do you then know? How did you get to know that the twins are autistic?
Okay. One of the first things I'll tell you is the twins' diagnoses are actually 5 years apart. But the sign that many of us as parents see is when our kids are over a year, 18 months to 2 years. At that time, when you're expecting your child to communicate a bit more. So, for most places in the world, I think 18 months above there would be where a lot of diagnosis happens. Why? Because
Mm.
maybe your child is not mimicking what you're doing. Like I said, for many parents, it's my child is this age and they are not speaking. Other children are already moving. Another group of people who I feel are very important in this journey are ECD practitioners. I think because they are in a space where they're teaching children about socialization, they see that. But now looking back at my son, there are things I do recognize. I recognize how Letabo struggled to sleep. Anaka potologa there the whole night re sa robale, or he would veer away from crowds or where there are too many people. Maybe waspina, maybe o tsamaya ka di-tippy toes ka matsetsekwane, maybe he's closing his ears, maybe he's flapping, maybe he's spinning. And I think it's also at that age where I guess you're supposed to be a bit more social, and then ngwana wa gago cannot be around people. So you're at that point, e le gore, ke ngwana o tlhoile batho, or what is happening? It doesn't make sense. And because at this point they are not communicating or speaking, it gets quite confusing, for a lot of us as well. In my case, it would be, I'm having twins. They are boys. They were premature. You say as a parent, like, something is wrong, or something is happening with my child, and you're told, no, 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 ke bashimane, ba premature, ke ma twins, they will be a bit slower. But I think for
Mm.
me, it was going to ECD where the teachers were saying, listen, ngwana wa struggler. And at that time, you're also thinking, maybe it's terrible twos, maybe it's tantrum, right?
Mm.
But
Mm.
it's more. There's something about it that is more than the usual where ngwana akakwata and then you give them something and they're fine. This one is it's more uncontrolled and it seems painful in a way, if I could say it that way.
Mm. Yeah. And I can imagine how for us people who don't even know the signs, ngwana has atoma aba in that way where they don't want noise, maybe they are throwing tantrums. Some of us are quick to spank them because umatepe, uyeza this, uyeza that, without actually knowing that ngwana is trying to say, hey, I have a problem. But also you are highlighting the fact that as parents we really need to pay attention, because you gave signs, right? Things that you would pick up on to say, but why arata to flap hands, why arata go tswala ditsebe? Why is he doing this? Because I'm sure it won't be just once where they do
Mm,
that. It will be something that happens consistently. And when something, maybe if there's noise, you see that whenever there's something or there's noise, this person reacts in a certain way. Whenever there's shouting, there's something, they scream or whatever that they do to say to you, this thing that is happening right now is making me feel uncomfortable, or it's bringing out this reaction in me. So parents, caregivers, let's pay attention to things that are, and I don't want to use the word abnormal because it's not, abnormal in their world, right? But to things that indicate to you that, what is this? Maybe something is happening here and I need to find out. So you say their diagnosis was 5 years apart. When one was dealing with now being diagnosed, was the other one not showing signs, or what was happening?
And that is what I want to talk to say there's no two autistics that are necessarily the same, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
it gets confusing. So I remember with us, it was a matter of with Letabo, it was very obvious because the talking wasn't happening. In Elena and Ashoa out more than ever. And I think
mm,
also it gets confusing in the sense like you're a first time parent, you don't know what's going on. And there's something about parenting where there are so many voices and so many things that come in that it gets incredibly confusing, right?
mm, mm,
And another thing I have learned now in hindsight is where would you go? Initially, you would go to your clinic or your pediatrician or your GP or the people that you know. But autism is such a, or had been such a rare condition that a lot of them didn't necessarily understand it as such. That is why I come back to ECD teachers, maybe occupational health persons, who are the ones who seem to be like, no, this is autism. In fact, one of the things I like to say to my fellow mothers is, you need to have your own questionnaire for your team, for your team to be like, do you know autism? What is your belief on
mm,
autism? Because even our specialists need to be specialists in autism because it's one of those conditions, whether in inclusive education, whether in health, it is covered, but not in depth, unless somebody is specializing as a pediatrician or a psychiatrist or in developmental health, they would not know it in depth. But like I
yeah,
say, the fact that it presents so differently. So yes, so the boys had delayed speech. They were late in communicating, and
mm,
Lesedi at some point did start communicating and could seem to be grasping some things, whereas Letabo again Ananali the very clear indications. And even when we were looking for school, it was still a case of these people are twins. Is this one mimicking that one's behavior, or is it really his behavior? So, for
mm,
example, if I had to bring you into today, my boys are 13 and 13 years old and 3 months. At this point, Letabo is still non-speaking, right? He points at all the things he wants. Lesedi speaks, but Lesedi stutters and he struggles with he has things that show that he's autistic. So there is repetitive behavior. You see that in your child. You see your child how mo reketse toy a batla fela levili la koloi kapa a itshwareletse ka letlapa kapa a pole fela. So there is what would be called inappropriate attachments, which are not as what you're used to, you know.
mm,
So those are some of the indications, but especially that repetitive behavior, that needing things to be structured and predictable. Um, so those are the one that there's one that was really frustrating, which is no fear of anything. Our children go through this phase where they fear nothing. So a ka pagama
fearful.
di-steps di balcony, bona fear fokole ya nnete, skrik for niks. And
Yeah.
it was very difficult because on top of that, there's also a phase in autism, maybe it's an elopement. So I'm mona motho a ntse tsamaya ka matsetse kwane nkare ballerina. Speed
Mm,
sa hae o sfina ha balea. You're like, and then I have twins. They don't run in the same directions. Oh, moya kwa, oh, moya kwa. You're like, what is going on? And you can imagine what this is doing to you in a social situation. You're
mm,
already looking like Mutadi Asafella. Like, God,
mm,
there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Why are your
yeah.
children acting like this? A lot of people would have seen that. You're like, why if ngwana sa kgone go dula still? Hey, wa
Mm,
hemela wa pagama di sofa o ya kwa. And many times we take that as being ill mannered or ill
Yeah.
discipline or,
And bad
just
parenting. Yeah.
yes. And then, one other, and another one we definitely have, because there's breakdown in communication, is potty training. So you are having a 5, 6, 7, 10-year-old who is struggling because of the eight senses I told you. The proprioceptive speaks to your body being able to feel temperature or not, or receive messages that I need to go to the bathroom, I need to do this. Ke jele ke kgotsa, I don't have to eat until ke tlatsa. So and I think at that
Mm,
moment as a parent, especially when you're going to spaces and you haven't found a space where they know that this is autism, you are actually feeling like you are going crazy yourself, you know.
mm,
Because another thing that happens in autism is the lack of sleep. I mean,
mm,
we are grown, we are many years into the journey, but at least twice, even three times a week, Letabo has nights when he doesn't sleep. And ha sa etse wa etsa o tle ba thepa, wa hama, wa repeat. So it's if it's behavior you've never come across, it is weird. It is like hwamakatsa, and you feel like you're in this echo chamber on your own.
mm,
Yeah, so until you get a diagnosis. So when diagnosis comes, a lot of time what the medics would be responding to would be our children become like this because at that point ngwana le ena o stressed gore why are you as my parent not understanding me, so there's
mm, mm.
frustration. So a lot of people will say yes, autism but them are aggressive, and what I would say, and that's why earlier I reminded you that it's a neurological condition. It is not
Yeah.
necessarily intellectual, it is not necessarily a mental health disorder. It is neurological. It is the working of the brain. This says to you that an autistic person, that does not mean they are lacking in IQ. It's just they
Yeah.
communicate differently. Imagine in your body and everything making sense to you and nobody understands you. I think we would understand why there would be bouts
Mm,
of aggression and frustration, because why let's understand what I am
yeah.
going through, and why can
Yeah.
you not assist? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
No, let me in this moment, Khomuzo, really, appreciate the strength you have, because listening to it, I'm imagining myself, or how would I cope, having, if one child as nang autism, as nang any other illness or condition, ali too much. How do you then cope, with having to manage two, spectrums? Because I think, one maybe might be hypo, one is hyper. So if one is low, the other one is feeling very high, energetic. Now you need to manage this one and get them to feel comforted if that's what they need at that time. And the other one is running around the house, screaming. I can imagine, how it takes extra strength and grace, I want to believe, to be able to get to the next day and still put the smile on your face and still look as pretty as you look, even after not sleeping. So I really, applaud you for that, and for the love you have for it, because I'm sure other people end up giving up. Do you find that maybe there are people who then take their children to homes because they can't cope, or is it sad that most of parents with autistic children really navigate the journey as allies to their children? What do you know in the sector? Is it a
Yeah.
common thing, or?
I will backtrack. I'll backtrack on something you just said. Because you see, and the behaviors are so strange because yes, there is a lot to this journey. But for me, it is very important to say that as much as there's a lot, it is not all always miserable and harsh. And
Mm,
I am not in the valley all the time.
mm,
The valley is part of it, but like you said, in raising children, in living, these are the things we go through. So, for example, that running around screaming would be somebody showing their joy. But I think what happens is because the behavior sa bana ba rona are seen as inappropriate and awkward to other people. So how kreile motho harass me you know, those are the things that do kenyetsa mahlo, right? So initially, when you're trying to respond to your kid's need, you are also not understanding. Therefore, you are looking for a teacher or a solution that can stop the stuff. Without understanding that behavior that our children sometimes exhibit, whether rocking, whether flapping, it is what they need to regulate themselves, right? And kaya work are regulating because Osfina, we all do it. It's just that because we fit into a mold, we don't see it. We all have a moment of stress where you start tapping your finger or your
Yeah.
pen or your foot.
Mm.
If you're
Mm.
me, you break out into song. We do that. But because what we do is generally acceptable, we don't see
Mm.
it as the same, but we'll do it. Whether you're counting to 10 or woosaring, that is what it is. And I
Yeah.
think it's difficult sometimes, even for parents to understand, because you wish your child would do something less embarrassing. I mean, Letabo went through a phase where he would spit. Yo, Ospina, naga kwamati everywhere. Like Otatella Montu. You're like, when do we stop this? But I'm happy
Mm.
enough because he would rather agagoledi pampiri. Like agagoledi
Mm.
pampiri ko nna nkare go confetti, nkare go lenyalo every day. But I would rather that. I would rather that because when I started the year, he was peeling paint off the wall. And it's that repetitive behavior that calms him. So you start learning about having things like fidgets, like things, fidgets in I'll explain it like wait, how kabale stroke le imba fa body stress ball or something that you can use so that this is how you, like they call it mindfulness. You calm
Mm.
yourself down. But it is not always very, very, very clear. I want to come to the strength and then your last questions about how
Yeah.
do parents respond. You know, it's been a journey for me. And when I was posting about today, I was saying to people, I actually looked at my last interview, Ntate Kikan, and to say, 3 years later, le nna ke godile. Like there are things
Mm.
one understands better, and you've met a few more people. My first position is there's nothing strong here. You know, God does
Mm.
not give special children to special parents. No, nagongwe God ibirara mokwatela gore Joe, like give me this, but help me run with this journey, please.
Mm.
Fund it, or do something so that I can understand. Or thusa ka batho ba gago modimo ka gore ha ba understand it. And you know, it's almost like rona ha re dutse le bana ba rona le autism ya rona ha rena bothata ke ha re tsenya lena because of the
Mm.
looks you give, the comments you make. And you know, ha bana ba sa bue, people are so cruel. They will say things
Mm.
around, not understanding they hear and see everything. So I think there has been a change from when I started with my kids to where we are. You know how no work at home. I remember early in the journey because you will blame yourself. You blame everything. Oh my Lord, I dropped out of university. Oh my Lord, I'm a single parent. Oh my Lord, papa, and therefore this is my punishment. Or I was fat.
Mm.
Or I was thin. Or I did, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think it becomes very hard because to date there's nothing that says that autism happens because of this
Yeah.
specifically. It is so
Yeah.
varied. When you meet parents, sometimes it's a firstborn, sometimes it is all the children, sometimes it's the child right in the middle. So, you know, for us who had first kids, you're worried, if I get pregnant again, am I going through this again? Because, you know, in the education space, they'll remind you that one autistic child is to 6 or 8 children, energy
Sure.
wise, and need. So, a lot
Mm.
of people have children, and for their toddler years, you know, you have to be alert. We have to be alert and observant and patient for a lifetime, depending
Mm.
at the type of support that your child requires. And at that point, I remember before COVID, I used to feel, "Gore, Patong, I'm not making enough money. I'm failing my kids. Gore pera, gore music therapy, gore home." And that's also a very tricky one. I mean, I had a point where even my own parents knew, don't even mention that because, Lord, I didn't wait to 31 to go to tsamaisa bana. But as you're with
Mm.
them, you also want them gone, you know? And I want us later in our next segment to speak to the dance of acceptance and grief because it is part of what gets us to the
Mm.
journey. So what happened? COVID came. We all got locked up with our kids. Those who had their kids in homes, those who had swimming classes and everything. Bona lockdown e ya tla ra kwallwa le bana ba rona ba botlhe. No teachers, nobody else to blame, and just us to look at our kids and get an understanding of what this condition is. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents, until you have fully understood the condition and the condition as it presents in your child and
Yeah.
accepted it, which acceptance in our journey, Mama, it's not a destination. It's not ke acceptile ngwanaka, we are happy. There are things along the journey. Bana ba bang ba tlhagileng at the same time with your child are moving on. I mean, my kids'
Mm,
peers this year were starting high school. That's not the journey we're in. We can't even say, are we in grade one or grade three or grade, because we're in a decaps space. So you are having
mm,
reminders of Hore, oh my Lord, Kana, yes, I may have won the battle, Yadi or battle in, but there's still other battles that are constantly coming. So
mm,
I have found that parents struggle. Some parents feel, okay, let me take my child away, but you always pine for your child, or do
mm,
I keep my child? Because gape gone yaanong bo Lethabo, ba lekana le nna ka botelele. They are also big because sometimes the medication, go weight gain, ngwana ha ba le di meltdown, it gets violent, So sometimes whether your child lives in the house or out of the house is also a matter of safety,
mm.
right? But
Yeah.
in our world, in our South Africa, where are the resources? We already struggle so much just to get into ECD, into schooling, into social support. That many times, I mean, the average, our kids would start school at about 8, 9, even 10, if you are
Mm,
lucky. And
mm,
then you are not like everybody else. I always laugh in Gauteng when people are phoning the radio station, like, no, go school down the road. I'm like, Dali, we have been driving the 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers forever because hard ticket and the school is available now. That is what you're going to take because there
mm,
is nothing else. You're going to go to the private space where you are paying anything from 3,000 to 25,000 a month.
mm.
And Leone Eo, it's a whole other market where now where hope is promised. Do we
Yeah.
stop the gluten? Do we stop the sugar? Do we do stem cell therapy? Do we
Mm,
then go get king rarapela na? Do we stop this? Then go gae he re bona motho na kapo ke boloi ka. So there are so many things that keep coming, and you are in the space where I have this child. I love this child, but sometimes I don't understand this child. And what does that say about
mm.
me as a mother, as a parent? What does that say about you and your partner? Because ale bone ka go tshwana.
Yeah.
So go go ntsi ma, go go ntsi. I
Yeah.
think I
No,
think
as
sometimes
you
even more.
unpack it, I can see that but I see that someone is saying they won some battles. So that gives me hope that all hope is not lost because there are battles that you win and then you start another battle. And that's the journey of everyone, right? You know,
That's the
that's the
journey of
journey of,
everyone.
of everyone for as long as you are here on planet Earth. You are at the intersection, right? Where there are so many cars coming at you, wanting to hit you. Ke koloi ya bolwetse, ke koloi ya stress, ke koloi ya mojolo, ke koloi ya unemployment. Like, ke tse
There's a lot. And
ke
and,
tse
and I agree
yeah.
with you. And I love the fact gore o berekisitse koloi, because you need to be hit, fall down, surrender. And I
Mm,
think one of the difficult things, as a parent, like I said, ideally you are supposed to know everything. But I think this is one of those journeys where you also have to humble yourself, look at, understand your child, and let your child lead you. Because these kids that we're talking about, because this person is feeling, this is what I want. Why are you not understanding? And I think as a
mm,
parent, part of the acceptance journey is to sometimes close out the noise, to
yeah.
say, what is the reality in my life? You know, if Osfina Kobone, they can minus the lactose and minus the wheat and the what and the what, that's all good. For me, I had Letabo. not eating. Then one day he started eating wheat bix, and you are not going to tell me about lactose and gluten because suddenly
Mm.
my child is eating, and they were eating more than apples. And I am a parent. My child needs to be fed. This is the
Yeah.
journey I'm going with. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
here's also another one where you get, people come with all sorts of miracle cures. You know, motare, hey, ke tshwere eng, e tla etsa so, kenya ngwana mo oileng, o tla tswa, o tla bolela. And because you have that hope, I mean, to have a
Yeah.
child go past the years of saying mama, whatever, to grow up, one of the funniest things, Lethabo Bulele, ne, so he makes sounds. And I was saying with a fellow mother whose child is also non-speaking, to say, "Gore, this journey is so cruel and so funny in the sense, your child is not speaking, Margar Omo those teenage years. Ke a utlwa gore voice e crackile because ha e sale ha so le ho. You're like, oh my god. So on top of it, you're becoming a man now. Even when I still haven't heard you call my name, so there is those frustrations, there is those pinings. I mean, there's moments where we don't want to Allah and you don't know, and they can't tell you what they want.
Mhm.
So what has been a blessing, and I will go back to the COVID thing, has been the growth in parent community. I
Mm.
think as there's nothing that works quite as well as people coming together. People coming
Yes.
together with like experiences and speaking to each other. And I think for me, it has been a saving grace to be part
Mm.
of autism support groups, moms groups,
Mm.
where we are all mothers, where motohar bona, motole anaja maltabella, no tiger bell, prenza haiseta maltabella, today ojile rice, and everybody can say, yes, that is exciting because Osfina
Yeah.
could be my twin sister. But if she's not going through this journey, she doesn't understand. She
Yeah.
doesn't understand gore ngwanaka o ntse a le mo leleireng at age 10. Ha kgone
Mm.
kapa o ya tšhelete ga a kgone go iphomola. But when you're in a group of mothers, because I always say to people, as an ally, there's only so much you can do. But
Yeah.
also allow people, and that's why sometimes I mean, in one of my favorite groups, we are just mothers. We are just black mothers, in fact, and we bona restrict arga kraus fina akene kapo Dr. Mang Mang a tlo ngolang PhD, we will get rid of you because this is a
Mhm.
safe space where
Yeah.
ha ke bua ka ngwanaka gore ngwanaka o entse so, because one of the other painful things in autism is there can be a sudden without warning regression. So o feel gore re tsamaetse go pele and all of a sudden we are not doing that. You had
Mm.
people who were talking and one of it got 3 or 4 and then they just stop. There is no reason. There's
Yeah.
nothing that can explain to you what has happened. So I think with parents coming together, we've been able to share experiences about kids, experiences about teaching institutions, medical cures, and having that council of other parents really normalizes and makes you feel a bit more sane than you otherwise would have felt. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think and I don't know how much government gets involved. I mean, with things like HIV, we know government is in the forefront. They put, aside money, they invest in helping with preventing, with curing, with educating, right? Is that something that exists for autism, where that there are campaigns that are funded, there are subsidies that are given for education, so that you take your child to the best school that will understand them and their needs, and they'll be able to manage them, without actually causing more harm and even ending up abusing your child because they are misunderstood.
Osfina, I could have a short answer and say for right? But I've also, as you know, I am a government official myself. I think one
Mm.
of the things I have learned is I was saying to the HIV activists, one of the things I think they gave us all the rights, all the guts to say is to talk about your personal experience. And I
Yeah.
always take that from the HIV space. But with autism right now, and I think with the umbrella of disability, I mean, it's very hard to move in spaces where you're only dealing with a white paper or a policy. And then you are getting autism, which is so nuanced and not easily understood. Number one. Number two, what are even our numbers of autistic people? I mean, the majority of us ba bolelang gone yaanong, ke rona that have got access to some sort of information. You
Yeah.
know, in many times as we're sitting, ha re bue le somebody wa ko Ramatlaba Makomafikeng or in
Mm.
another small village somewhere. Somewhere people are with autistic kids and they don't know that this is what it is. The
Mm.
clinic doesn't know, nobody knows. I think
Ba itse
what
ngwana a
has done,
loilwe ne?
excuse,
Ke re ba itse
I think
ngwana o loilwe and ba
go
treat-a
to
as
ngwana o
boloi.
loile, go to ngwana ke whatever, or it was the wrong marriage, or you know, whatever it would be. But I think
Mm.
what has been helpful has been the tidal wave of, because I think almost everybody I know who's organizing is a parent or has been somewhat directly affected. And thank God, because I don't think anybody else is better placed. Of course, educators, you know, educators are people, even the Department of Education, I tend to applaud a lot, because unlike everybody else, they at least know a bit that what they are doing is not
Mm.
the biggest thing. It is not resourcing and reaching everybody, but at
Yeah.
least finally somewhere more line item in bone where autism and this is. Whereas everybody else, you know, le ga re bua gone yaanong, we're about to wrap up our conversation and we are still talking about autistic children. But autistic children become autistic adults, you know?
Mm.
And the system is providing for you. Bana ba tlo tsena sekolo, ha ba fetsa 1821, where do they go? You know,
Yeah.
Ospina, this is one of the most expensive journeys you'll ever go through. And for me, the expense is not just about what is being offered, it almost feels like a penalty. You didn't know that your child is going to struggle to communicate.
Yeah.
If ngwana a tlo kena ko beseng, o tlhoka assistant. Le ngwana ha le
Mm.
ko tlelaseng, there needs to be an assistant. Medical aids don't get it. So you get a medical aid that can agree that my child is chronic, but cannot align the therapies to that medication and that condition. And it is
Mm.
those nuances we discussed at the beginning. Jorge. Are we neurological or mental health or intellectual? You know, what is it? And
Yeah.
because there doesn't seem to be one set thing. So, you know, over the past few years, I mean, when I think about Letabo getting diagnosed in 2016 and now 2025, listen, we live in a different world. There has been a lot of improvement, but it has been from the level of parents. Because
Mm.
I always tell my fellow parents, listen, we don't have the luxury of failing into depression, although depression has to come after us. You are tired, you are physically
Mm.
tired, you are emotionally, financially exhausted, because when you go on a journey like this, you get isolated. You're
Yeah.
isolated by family. You're isolated by you're isolated by the church, because
Mm.
I mean, if Dr. Kekana kapo sfina tshwantse a ema mo le mo pele, nna ngwana ka ntse a re phantse phezulu, e kapo a screama nkare o tshwere ke
Madimoni.
bosatane or something. Like, it's almost like we'll pray for you. Yesterday I was on an interview and somebody asked me, "Jorge, so what can we do? Can we bring you a meal?" And we're like, no, we don't want you to be away. We want you to come, because the only way you're
Mm.
going to understand our kids is to be around us. And I think the best lesson I could say to people is, please be curious, but be curious with kindness. Let's
Yes.
ask. Because ngwana ka le ngwana o Sefina are not necessarily having the same needs. So instead of, hey, ke ntshitswe mo WhatsApp groupung, hey, there's my friend, my best friend, ke bana ba tshwere children's party, nna bana ba ka ba invite you. Tell me, gore, hi, we were
Mm.
going to bounce. Is it going to be appropriate for your child? And then give me the right
Mm.
to say, no, it actually won't work. But at least you did remember, you know?
Mm.
You can
Mm.
ask me about my child. I'm at that point where I would rather you ask than not, because I can
Yeah.
see what you're thinking. You know, one of my favorite things that have come with autism that I've learned from these kids, you know, autistics, that's why I get away bashapo, because
Mm.
they don't have to cut through the nonsense and the pretense that we live through. You know, my child, how le moeng mo a feel gore o ya ga o mo ratile, bona he can cut you off, he can go ice cold. Whereas Rona, we are stuck in the nuances of, okay, is it fine? Did she really was she really nasty or wasn't she really?
Mm.
But what this is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
So show
Yeah.
some kindness, get some knowledge. I did a post yesterday where I was saying to people, at this point, really, if you're an activist of any level, you cannot tell me you do not know about autism. Re busy
Mm.
man, re ko kerekeng, re ko ditrateng, re ko dishopong, re biletsa ko diphakeng. Anybody who is not knowing because they're not interested. And they are not
Yeah.
interested because as much as they speak about unity and diversity, it doesn't really happen. And I want to bring
Mm.
it back, especially the interface with gender and gender rights. Osvina, I mean, we talk about mothers because we're mostly mothers. There are also
Mm.
fathers living on this journey. But for me, I find it so interesting. Do you know how much of your life is taken away? Yeah, like how your life pivots when you become a
Mm.
primary caregiver of somebody whose needs encompass so much. You know,
Yeah.
who Khonso was supposed to be is no longer going to be that. So when
Mm.
we sit and we talk about women empowerment and we forget that in the lines, go to clinic, go to home affairs, go to keep on me, you know, keep
Mm.
on us who are taking care. So as we talk about the intersection, when you're talking about molestation and sexual violations of children, imagine the fear that you live with when your child cannot communicate
Yeah.
what could or could not happen. And I think for me,
Mm.
that is what has always scared me. Kadi hostelele in to say, this child cannot tell me what happened. And I have
Mm.
seen, we see it in our homes, how re kenya batho ba tlo re salla le bana, ba tlo re cleanela. I'm one of those. My son gets very irritated with me, but I have random body searches. I have a moment where I'm like, I have to see what's happening with you because I can say people
Mm.
hurt our kids.
Yeah.
They started
Yeah.
hurting them Cabo ECD Lescolo when they were not potty trained on time like other children,
Yeah.
which then brings them more into their cocoon. You know, people can
Mm.
be very
Mm.
cruel with people who cannot communicate on their own behalf. And I think
Sure.
also in this condition where autism does not present physically, but babona fela, but ba snacks, ba that are ill mannered and do not know how to
Mm.
act properly. And
Yeah.
there's that misconception, yeah, repataban. How repataban was fina. It is difficult to go around
Mm.
with my kids when I'm constantly having to deal with people who do not know how to act human. You know,
Yeah.
motho a sa mindeng gore ha bona go tsagala, a nka o botsa how many times ngwana ka o tshwariwa ka di-washing because Letabo sees an apple and he wants an apple and he doesn't care
Mm.
that it's in your child's hand. He
And to
wants
him,
that.
it's not stealing, right? Because
It's
it's
not
not recording
stealing.
that if I take this, I'm
Yes.
stealing it if I don't ask for permission. I see
And
this.
you,
This is what I
yes.
love eating. I'm going to take. Yeah.
And you are not wrong as well. How do you see the baby girl wa gago ka Minnie Mouse outfit ya gage o bona abuti o mongwe fela a sa tlo mo phama. You know, so I think
Mm.
3 years later, I am no longer just at the point where I'm like, oh, we're going through autism. Oh, we're so helpless. Why are you guys be? I've gotten to a point where I do get the other side. I do
Yeah.
get, you know what, Khomoto, in as much as you didn't know about this, a lot of people don't. So you
Mm.
actually do have to take the responsibility of telling people, telling my
Yeah.
neighbors, hey, nako nngwe o tlo utlwa mabota a shapua, ga go lwaniwe, ke motho o etsa dilo tsa
Mm.
gagwe. He is singing a song. It's not, you know,
Yeah.
it's not that deep because the things people feel are also valid.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Sure. I think, you've really touched the hearts of people with this. I can see from the comments that people have learned. And this is the purpose of why we have the Enlightenment Corner. We want to enlighten you and we want you to be aware because knowledge gives us that extra, mile to walk to say, okay, I know better now. So I don't have to judge Khomotso ha na le ngwana ko shopong ngwana a screama mo fatshe gore hey o
Yes.
irresponsible why a sa mo shape o papalla go godisa bana and all that. You will maybe in your heart maybe even say a little prayer to say God help her because look, I understand what is happening. But to all of us, we need to see human beings before we see illness, before we see anything that is not you know what is familiar to us. See the human being first and just your heart must reach out to a person. I wonder what's happening. Instead of saying, or I wonder what's happening. Because maybe then they'll come and ask. This is where you were saying ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. Maybe they'll come and say, what's happening? Do you need help? And whatever. Before Tamari post, because these days I get a video comments. A very poster, a very trend how, everybody commented the way by didn't comment. Not matter. In all the things that we say without actually realizing. So I think we are so empowered, and we will continue, learning more, because like you said, but yeah, right now I just want to say thank you. We are at 20:05, and I know people want to attend to other things. So I don't know if you have last words, parting words to give us, more nuggets,
Yes.
an
Okay,
appeal,
no,
whatever.
Len, I'll try to wrap up. I've enjoyed this conversation. I've even enjoyed the way that it's been done. Like I did say, we could never cover everything within an hour.
Yeah.
There are very different elements to it. Thank you for this, and thank you for not just being curious, but also like what you're doing. You're an ally. You're saying, I
Mm,
will create a platform, I will amplify your voice. I will
mm,
say, yes, we don't know what is going on. Let's give you a chance to give. Because, with the last thing that you just said, it's so funny. Because sometimes how work go trend a little video, I always find other spaces, mainstream media, and other people are like, ke tlo go bolelela gore ngwana ka ha robale kapo ngwana ka o sokodisa ka potty training, and people are like, mare batla go mona, forgetting gore motho o le ena o na le dignity. Believe me, as a parent, when I'm telling
mm,
you that this is the difficulty of the journey, this is it. But
yeah.
too many times, everybody's doubting Thomas. They need to see it before they say, okay, this is what it is. Because, like I said to you earlier on, our children are incredible beings. They are
Mm,
humorous, they are argumentative, but they're also very in tune with what is happening in life. It is just the manner in which they communicate is different, and they need us to show some patience, some kindness, and to offer support.
yeah.
And I have enjoyed this. I'm enjoying this parenting journey. I think I've been blessed to be on a journey that requires me to be active, observant, and there. Because more out of babysit we got the TV. More to attention and then they need to move on. But I am
Mm,
grateful. I am a big believer that many things di change ka go buisana ga batho. Just
mm,
in talking,
mm,
we will learn something. We
yeah.
will. I'm yet to find a community that we speak to that somebody doesn't say, you know what, I didn't know what was going on with myself or with so and so, but now through this today, I know. So I'm
Mm,
very grateful. I'm happy to keep coming back. I enjoy your platform. Ke a leboga, ke a leboga, ke a leboga. And Modimo, a nona le babale, and the work that you do and the platform that you give. I really, really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Yes.
Thank you very much. And to everyone who joined us, we really appreciate you for coming on. And please share this information. I think, there are certain things that we must not be selfish about.
Yeah.
Let things like this trend in the same way Mugozi o trendang ka teng, Mijolo ya batho e trendang ka teng. This is life-saving, life-empowering, life-giving information. So, ke kopa le di share so that other people can learn from this, right? And it will remain on in His Grace and Mercy platform. So come and watch again if there's something you missed. But again, please do share, because it's important to equip each other, to empower one another. I'm gonna close with prayer and release you, Komosa. Thank you very much. I have you on my speed
God,
dial.
Remojo yan, we've made it live. I'm happy. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
let us
Thank you
thank
so much.
God. Modimo, re a o leboga for this opportunity. Learning, Modimo, your word says, study to show yourself approved. We thank you that we have learned so much, and that we'll be allies, we'll be activists, we'll be supporters, we'll be people who really stand in the gap for everyone who's on this journey, instead of using judgment. Father, we thank you. We bless you. May you bless all of us and all the families represented here. In the mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen and amen. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Goodbye. See you on Sunday.
The most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Film HD Radio.
In your face, all over the place.
We're online 24/7. 24/7.
You're listening to the hottest internet station